Today is the 5th day of the January 1986 7-day retreat. And there's an announcement before starting with a talk, which is about doors. The doors are being closed too noisily. There have been people who have mentioned it, reported about it. This refers particularly to the basement doors, which are used when one goes into the toilet and shower area, and to the bedroom doors and doors to the small washrooms upstairs. Particularly the period, I don't know whether it's particular, but the period between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, there seems to be a resounding of doors, which seems to emanate from the basement. There are 3 automatic doors, the one from the solarium to the kitchen hall, the one from the kitchen hall to the dining room, and the one from the kitchen hall to the whole dormitory area. Those close by themselves, and they do not make very much of a sound, so one doesn't have to stand there and wait till they're closed to aid it along and closing less noisily. But all the other doors do not have, except the ones leading into the meeting room, none of the other doors have this automatic closing device, so need to be closed very carefully. One can't close a door carefully if one is in a rush to do something else, if one is already thinking of the next step. One has to really give care to it. Not just the care of closing a door quietly, but also realizing that people are resting, and that this is an unnecessary impact when one is resting, to have the noise of doors. We'll go on to some of the questions again that were asked during meeting. One person asked, is it at all possible that one will not be hurt again? And after looking at this for quite a while, the question continued, and is it also possible not to hurt another again, another person? When a question comes up, one can, first of all, look where the question comes from. Is one asking the question because one is so sick and tired of being hurt? That one does not want to go through this process one more time. It's just been too much hurt in one's life. As one thinks back, there has been just a seemingly unending series of being hurt, including the hurts that one may not even remember, but they also resonate with each hurt, because our associative system of memories is interconnected. There's a whole network of memory, which includes physical memories, from day one. So is one asking, is it possible never to be hurt again? Because one does not want to go through it again. And one, in that case, is almost ready to do anything to prevent another hurt, which is a dangerous position to be in. We're always in a dangerous position if we want something very badly, because then we're willing to pay a price, submit to a system on which we then become dependent. A system, a person, a drug or smoke, alcohol, entertainment, anything to grab onto, or reading, working, as there's no end to what can serve us not to get hurt again, not to feel the hurt, including growing a thick skin, making the body so numb, or the mental system so numb that hurt just doesn't penetrate, which is leading a rather lifeless existence. Or is one asking the question because one is really interested in this phenomenon of getting hurt, which is so all-pervasive among human beings. There's nothing personal about getting hurt and about the mechanism of getting hurt and the reactions to getting hurt. In the former case that we discussed, one will seek methods to avoid it or to counter it or to numb it. But none of these methods, even if they work temporarily, not to feel the pain of hurt. I say temporarily because our body is so constituted that it needs stronger and stronger doses of everything, because it gets used to things. And we mentioned the dependency that develops. If it isn't that, if one really wants to find out about why do I get hurt? And is it inevitable that this drama will perpetuate itself, getting hurt, and then all my reactions that come up to get back, to get even, to defend or aggress against the one who is hurt? Then one can also wonder whether it's possible for this to come to an end, not through any practicing any methods or taking any things by mouth or needle, but through understanding this whole process. If it works, if one will find out, if the understanding will prevent further hurt, one doesn't know. And that is not the important thing. Again, we talked about it earlier. We're so conditioned to look and work toward the end result. The end result is what gives us the energy to work and to look. That's how we've been programmed. But there is another way of asking a question and looking and not knowing the end result, not knowing whether there will be one. And therefore the energies working undividedly. Undivided because there's not me who conceives of an end result and the end result toward which I work, which is already a split, a duality, which in itself causes untold conflicts and problems and miseries. Dissatisfaction if one doesn't reach the goal, dissatisfaction with one's present state, which if that dissatisfaction is there with the getting heard, one can't really inquire into it. One is so frustrated, so angry over it, that the eyes aren't clear to look. So does one see that in order to inquire into a problem like, why do I get hurt and does this have to continue? There cannot be any goal in mind at that time of questioning. And no reactions against getting hurt, the pain of it. I want to get rid of it. I don't want it. Because then the inquiry is also already distorted. It's not factual and open. Why does one get hurt? Or how does one get hurt? Is one really into this question? Not just now. We'll try to go through the whole thing now. But if it happens again, maybe it'll never happen again. Maybe this will settle it. Who knows? But if it does happen, will man be so taken up with the content of the occasion? Or will the question dawn, why am I getting hurt? Because then the whole thing turns around from a series of automatic feelings and reactions and counter-reactions to inquiry, to pausing and looking. What is happening as it happens? It's a tremendously fertile ground for looking, because the energies are there, they have been aroused. And one can really see, one doesn't have to reconstruct it in one's mind. So someone tells one in a crude, impolite way about something one has done wrong, which one wasn't even aware of that one has done it wrong. And there's the hurt. My feelings are hurt, would be the expression. He really hurt my feelings. Why were the feelings hurt? What is the whole mechanism of it? Does one have an idea of oneself that one doesn't make mistakes? We may not say that. We may not admit that and say, it would sound too gross. I don't make mistakes. But one may cling to that image of oneself, of not making mistakes, because from past experience it has been painful to have made mistakes. One has been sensitive about the blame for it ever since one can remember. A very painful thing to be blamed for having made a mistake. and one can't even look at that. It's too painful. So the reaction will be the reaction to the hurt. And the hurt came also from the impolite, crude way a person talked. The reaction will be a defense, or a counterattack, or a withdrawal. What is it though that has been hurt? We said maybe the idea of being without mistakes, of not making mistakes, that image has been hurt. Also the image of being a friendly person. Being someone who deserves being talked to in a considerate way. Depending on how one has been brought up, in one's home there may never have been spoken crude words, there may have been a learned politeness in which one never told somebody right straight to his face what one thought about that person or what that person did. One couldn't. Nobody did that. It was always sort of in very veiled terms, and here this bluntness hurts this image of being a delicate person. Actually, in looking at it, something has been hurt. If one has had a friendly communication with this person and with other persons, in a blunt remark which is not put in friendly, polite terms, this relationship for the moment has been hurt. But if that's all that's been hurt, one can see that and not take it personal. One can see that for the moment there's something going on that is violent, insensitive. And if the self-image hasn't been, self-image always hurts in a case like this. That is what hurts. Do you see that? Yeah, one has to see it as it happens. Maybe to just talk about it isn't enough. So please, can we ask ourselves when we get hurt, and we get hurt all the time, so-and-so really hurt my feelings. I don't even want to talk to him anymore. Then to look, what is it that got hurt, whether it isn't this image that one has of oneself, and then to question whether one needs this image at all. The image of being perfect, well, maybe not perfect, but without mistakes. Of how one should be talked to. Because if we can imagine right now that one didn't have any of these images, and somebody pointed out in a rude way that one made a mistake, would there be a hurt, or would there just be wondering whether what the person is asserting is actually so? And one would be free to look. With a hurt self-image, one is anything but free to look. We are then on automatic. The reactions come as they have come for the last 30, 20, 40 years. Defense or retaliation. Or a control. One may have learned or been brought up to control any reaction, so there is another control, another repression of a reaction going on, which then results in a mood that one may carry around for days, for hours or for days, in the presence of this person or in the presence of other persons. What would make it possible to see factually what is going on at this moment? We said the self-image does not make it possible. It is always the victim, or the aggressor, the reactor. What makes it possible to see that at that moment and not be swamped by the whole system, by the whole program, which, as this person pointed out, and as we all know has been going on, it's an ancient one. And it has such powerful feelings, reactions, emotions in it because it is so ancient, because all our past hurts and reactions are plugged in into this present image and hurt of image. Whereas if energy gathers in awareness, attention, listening, seeing, in that awareness, the image is not in power. It is not connected. It is seen. But it isn't reacting, because when it is seen, it doesn't react. Seeing disconnects not just this image, but all the images of the past that it is connected with. There's nothing to be taken on faith or to start believing in, but to check out for oneself whether when there's a moment of intense attention, let's leave the intense out. People say, I'm not intense. But when there's really awareness which is not self-centered, which is whole, free from any program, then the present image and its connections to the past images is disconnected. And therefore there's no hurt. Therefore there is seeing of the situation as it is unfolding itself. Someone coming on in a impolite, aggressive way. And one has, I think, only in this awareness, without self-image, is there the possibility to really look at the person who is talking. Without projecting an image onto him or her. And that's a vital ingredient of that situation. To be able to look at the so-called offender and let the looking at him or her reveal where he's coming from or she's coming from, which does reveal itself if one doesn't project something onto that person or doesn't defend. if there's not this attention and one dwells in the image with it all its background images, then one already knows what a person like that is like. And if there is not the awareness and the reaction comes up, it reacts against the image that one has of this person. One doesn't see who's there. And when the whole thing reveals itself, the first reaction may still have been triggered, but if one sees the whole thing, it doesn't need to burst out. It doesn't need to be controlled or suppressed. It just needs to be seen. In an enormous space of listening and looking, which is not the space of this little capsule we've talked about, in which we see nothing except old movies. And if, because there was this awareness, or there is this awareness now, of the whole incident as it actually is taking place, and I see that this person who's talking looks tired, hassled, irritated, lost, whatever. I don't mean interpreting, but seeing. You can look at a person and see when you're not angry or enamored with him. Then this whole incident, when it's seen like this, doesn't need to get marked down as another hurt, which will hurt with the next hurt. It is seen, and that's it. It doesn't have to be gone over and over and over again in one's memory as unfinished business. Either that one didn't tell him or her enough, or how could he or she have done that to me? Which is what keeps the mind occupied unendingly and strengthens this trace. I just was talking a little while ago with somebody who's studying the brain in school, and told me how interesting this was to hear that these synapses, the connections to memory, and remember all the details, are strengthened, they are thickened, the more one goes over it. We know it from experience. The more we've thought about something, the more the odds are we're going to think about it again. If one has gone through something completely with this open-mindedness, then one may very quickly forget about it. Somebody may say, remember how that was? And you say, actually, I forgot all about it. It's not that the memory is totally lost, maybe it is, but has not been established, which going over and over it does. And that it always wants action, or rather reaction. This is such a crucial thing. That's why we talk about it so much, and why it comes up so much. If one doesn't quite understand it, please bring it up in meeting. We'll go through it again. Because all of our conflicts and conflagrations in this world, not all of them, but most of them are based on past and carried over hurt and the images. What I am, how I should be treated, what I want to be, and what the others are, who we don't even know who they are. Libyans these days become the focus of our imagination of the evil empire. It's a tiny little empire. Sometimes we like tiny little empires. Grenada. To show to the world our image of, well, I don't want to go into that. Another question that came out of this, or was independent, I don't know where the question came out of this, was, what really is self-confidence? Hear a lot about it. This is often what psychotherapy is about, to build up a person's self-confidence. What is self-confidence? I don't have the answer yet. We'll look at it. Sometimes one has to start the other way around and look, what do we mean when we say I have no self-confidence at all? No confidence in myself. Doesn't it mean that one already knows that one is a loser? Someone who just doesn't have it? And if one immediately focuses on that, looks at that carefully, someone who doesn't have it or someone who is a loser, isn't that always in comparison with others who seem to have it and who always seem to get it, to be liked by people, to get advancements, be popular, to be successful. Of oneself, one has formed this idea that one is a failure because, after all, one can support it factually and list all of one's failures, which may have these thickened synapses in the mind. One has gone over and over it, or others have done it for one. Family and can often be merciless in implanting this idea. You never do as well as your brother, or why are you always at the bottom of the list, or grades, or... And there is this idea that if one tells somebody how poor he is and exhorts him to get better, that this will be effective. That telling somebody how poor he is or she is in comparison with others, that this will be an incentive. Which sometimes it may be. There are all these success stories of people who started out as losers until they told themselves. You get these little short stories when the Olympic series are on, and how many of these people who now have the gold medal started out that way. And it is endlessly repeated for all of our, I don't know what, entertainment. And it reinforces this idea that having a goal of becoming the star of the ice rink, whatever, that goal will mobilize the energies to become that star, which happens. In other words, the image of the loser has been replaced with the image of the winner, of the gold medal. And that's such a powerful goal. And one must have some talents. Not everybody who changes his images this way will get a gold medal. Skating or skiing. But we have these things in the back or in the foreground of our minds for ourselves and for others when we exhort others or when we go to psychotherapy in order to go into this whole thing of feeling a failure all the time, the depression of being a loser. So having these negative, we'll call them right now, negative images is not self-confidence, is it? It is anything but. And no matter how talented or good-looking one may actually be, if one has this image, one will ooze this out to the people with whom one is, and it will not be lost on most people. So when one sort of advertises oneself through one's image and one's belief in one's image as what one is. And since we're all so prone, not just prone, this is how most human relationships are, between images. Then one gets a confirmation in one's social life of what one is. Other people respond to what one presents. Please, this is not just said to say something in a talk, but it's so vital that we look at all this when it happens, or right now. It can be evoked. It can be looked at right now. So a person who substitutes a positive image for a negative image, does that person now have self-confidence? There are training institutes, not just psychotherapy, where one learns to think positively about oneself and develop confidence. I've been told by people in business that there are courses and seminars to instill self-confidence into the business executive, the salesperson. I remember once sitting in an airplane next to somebody who looked by dress and demeanor like a young yuppie. And he had this neat attaché case, which a lot of people carry on the airplane, and then open it up and take papers out and read them or write. And this, I looked over a little bit, was not quite discreet. There were instructions of how to build up self-confidence. My memory is not very accurate of this, but there were pictures. The pictures were not so good, on Xerox copies. Pictures you can't see from the side. Usually shades of gray into black. But the headlines of these different little paragraphs were readable, and it was how to comport is that the right word? Comport oneself in meetings with inferiors, with people who work for one, with people for whom one works. How not to get angry. All kinds of subtopics. Is this self-confidence? Having confidence in a learned behavior. it can pass for that. One has learned it, one has tested it out, and it works. One has made tremendous sales. People have bought. In other words, one has the results of it too. Of this new learned, confident, self-confident behavior. Which is, I think, quite clear, is all imagery and training and a new program put on top of an old one, which may have been the opposite. Negative images, lack of so-called self-confidence. Now you could say you've exaggerated a case here, even though those things do take place. But is there another kind of self-confidence which doesn't depend on having gone to institutes and been indoctrinated and behavior modified? Is there such a thing as a natural self-confidence? I think if we want to ask this question seriously, we have to ask again, what is the self? Upon which one is to have confidence. And even if one has not gone to any institutes to learn this in a concentrated, intensive way, one's whole self is a series of learnings of behavior that are either unsuccessful with people, with becoming popular or being liked, or very successful. That is the self, isn't it? All of our learned patterns and programs, and how we feel about them, how we feel about ourselves, which is not always even, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But when we feel real good about ourselves, something has just worked out well and we have been praised, or somebody has fallen in love with us. We're just using the expression as it is commonly used. Then there is this self-confidence. Which, if all of a sudden we're not successful, something goes totally awry at work, and the person who's fallen in love with us has fallen in love with someone else. Then where is the self-confidence? When looking at it in all these ways, one have to question whether one needs or should work for self-confidence at all, whether it should be at all an aim in one's life to have self-confidence, whether there is any substance to it. Or whether it's a forever shaky and undependable affair, which everything is that's based on conditioning and training, and ideas and goals and images. Is it necessary to have self-confidence at all? Or is it just a matter of listening, looking, attending from moment to moment to what's actually there? And as we have talked about many times, to really attend what's there, the self is in the way. Throws its shadow right across, blurs the vision. So rather than building up the self so it yields at times some self-confidence, isn't it of crucial importance to understand the self, to see it in action, from one moment to the next, with a seeing, a quality of awareness that has nothing to do with confidence. Confidence in what? Or confidence by whom? Seeing is seeing. Attention is attention. And if it's clear, then it's also clear what to do. And that doesn't depend on self-confidence. It depends on seeing what needs to be done. Or if one doesn't see clearly, or doesn't have all the facts, then that it is realized. One can't arrive at a decision. Or if one has to arrive at a decision, one sees its utter limitation. This has nothing to do with lack or existence of self-confidence. It has to do with the situation and with the state of being. Which is this whole situation. I think if one sees this, understands it, and looks at it further, if one doesn't understand it, so that it becomes really clear, maybe this whole comparison with people who seem to have so much self-confidence can wither away. Because it's always the undoing of one's attention and comparing oneself with someone who seems to be so self-confident and feeling so unsure of oneself. I think maybe it's much healthier to feel unsure of oneself, because then one may look to make sure one really understands and sees. Whereas if one's self-confident, why does one have to look? One doesn't need to look. One knows. One knows how to behave or how to proceed. Even though the basis on which one has learned to proceed may not at all correspond with the situation at hand. To really see the situation at hand, we cannot go back to what gave us confidence the last time, if we were successful in something. Because the situation has changed. It always has changed. It's never the same. That's why maybe what brought us self-confidence the last time, if we now use this pattern of behavior this time and it doesn't fit, results then in a failure, and then one is shattered again. Whereas if one begins unsure, not knowing, a task at hand, an interview. Well, who should be coming into an interview unsure? That's already an impossibility, isn't it? I don't know. It may be written so, but I mean, tentative about who one is, who the people who are interviewing one are, and therefore very flexible, very open. Not self-confident, but open to look and attend. And to say what one is asked about, to say what one feels like saying. One may be hired or one may not be hired. maybe if one is not tired, it's all for the better. If the search is for someone who has this plastic self-assurance, yeah, we've always been admonished, be sure of yourself. Don't be so wishy-washy. Know, be in the know. Of course, when it comes to building a bridge, one better know about stresses and strains. But in relationship, in human relationship, not to know who one is or who the other is may bring about this seeing of who we are. As we meet, and then not depositing this in the memory and going over and over it, because the next time will be different. Only thought fixes things as permanent. Life isn't like that. We will end for today